Hey everyone. I don't know who's with us, but we're gonna discover and figure it out. EJ and myself are the co-founders of Turtle Tank, an incubator for radical love and freedom. This used to be Turtle Tank, an incubator for radical entrepreneurs, and we've expanded out to include, living and working. We talk about radical creators, anyone that's creating something new, radical entrepreneurs, people that are organizing around entrepreneurship, and then radical leaders, people that are leading communities and movements. So that's really the folks that we want to reach. Um, you can read a lot more about our work at turtletank.co. We have this very, very special campaign out right now called Me First. And that campaign is the brain baby of the amazing Ije over here, who's obviously the co-founder of Turtle Tank. And I'm so excited for you all to hear more about her story. If you haven't read, some of the text that she's written on this campaign and why she started this campaign, go ahead and go to turtletank.co/me first. Very simple. You can go onto our site and click anywhere on the site. You're going to find the Me First campaign somewhere. And I highly recommend you reading. We're going to be running a series of stories from our community members. I'm going next, and there are a few of our what we call our OTs, or original turtles, that have been with us for the last couple of years, with stories to tell about how putting themselves first has been a really radical and revolutionary act. And it has in fact increased their impact, increased their the radical love and freedom in their work, and in how they've been able to grow themselves and those around them in exponential ways. So I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited to have you all. So here we are. I'm going to start by introducing Ije. Ije is one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met. One of the most tenacious and persevering human beings I've ever met.
Sometimes we call that stubborn.
I know, right? Sometimes, obviously, we work together, so we have our moments. But all in all, just integrity, character, beauty, love, warmth, all of the really wonderful qualities that I love in a human being. Just wanted to name that first, because all the other credentials we can talk about in a second, but just being a good person, for me is kind of at the foundation of all this, and is one of the most incredible human beings I know. So I feel like very honored to be introducing you, to be working with you, to be pushing out this baby of yours that is really core to how we work here at Turtle Tank, and really what's emerged out of our wisdom and our integration with Turtle Tank. So a little bit about Ije. You can read more online we have our bio on the site. And actually, I'm gonna pull it up and read it, because I think it's important for us to do that. So if you can give me one moment. We're coming here. All right. So Ije's official title is, she's the co-founder and the chief transformation officer at Turtle Tank. So we have that fun title up there. So Ije is a health and wellness strategist and a radical entrepreneur. She's also an artist, but she doesn't talk about that as much. She's coached radical entrepreneurs for the last 10 plus years, on managing their energy and revolutionizing how they work. Ije has 20 years of work experience in social justice and nonprofit organizations as an organizer, trainer, and facilitator. She has designed research-based curricula for organizations such as Girls Inc., Planned Parenthood, and the Freedom Institute. Today, alongside being a founder of Turtle Tank, Ije is a certified resilience toolkit facilitator who works with individuals and organizations to provide effective solutions to stress and trauma. Ije has a BA in human biology with a specialization in Black women's health and well-being from Stanford University, and an MA in integral counseling psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies, along with many other certificates and specializations you can find out all about if you join us. Ije is an avid learner and a constant learner, so very important note that. So, Ije, you know, I'm going to ask you some questions today. And if there's anything you'd like to say before we start, let me know.
No, I mean, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I'm just grateful I'm just thinking back actually, because it was actually on Facebook. Facebook is how I found you and how we connected and how Turtle Tank came to be. And so I was just thinking like, oh, that's so ironic that we're on here now, and that's how we started. And I have no idea when I picked up the phone to like, get on the call. It wasn't even a phone, but when I got on my first session with you, I had no idea that this is where we were going to end up. And I'm just grateful to you for your leadership and what it took for you to put out your work back then that brought me forward. And you were the first person that helped me make sense of all the things that I wanted to do. So I'm grateful that we met. I'm grateful for our work together and just how much we've learned and grown in the past 2 years with our turtle community.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very grateful as well for all the same things. And I want to get to you, so I know when I turn off and then give you the floor. Yeah. So just a little bit about the Me First campaign. We've tended to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of, our radical movements. And we're saying that doesn't work. That's it, So we want to provide an alternative approach that says, that putting ourselves first is actually the radical act and what creates revolutionary work. Mm-hmm. And so that flip, Ije, and we're going to talk a little bit about, some of and obviously I read your piece and we worked on it. We looked at it together, and I'm going to ask you questions knowing that that's also available for people to read and kind of pulling from that a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
All right. So my first question is in your letter that you wrote, you talked about the relationship between life and death, and the concept of me first. Mm-hmm. And I'd love for you to expand a little bit about what's the relationship between life and death as a Black woman to this concept of me first.
Yeah. I think this summer I'd been running around for months. And this summer I finally had a chance to just kind of stop running and just kind of let things settle. And I was really hit with like a lot of grief because last year, I lost my godmother, who was really close to me. We lost one of our turtles, also another Black woman. And their deaths really struck me in the ways that I felt like they were really preventable. And I also was just reconnecting with a lot of friends who were having health challenges, who were dealing with life and death situations. And just really sitting with this idea that, we're in a climate now where there's a lot of attention about how the lives of like Black and brown people are at risk. And we have these video cameras now where people are catching people in racist acts. So there's this like awareness. And what I feel like isn't talked about as much are the subtle ways that our lives are in danger and the impact of living in this world and the toll that it takes on our body. And so when I think about, the past, like I think it was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, there's a lot of attention now on the death rates, Black maternal health rates, and how Black women are dying at like higher rates than any other group in this country. And people really starting to ask the question of why. And there's a research study that came out that validated what we've known for years, that the medical system is racist and biased against Black women. And so doctors admit that when Black women tell them their symptoms, they don't believe them. Mm-hmm. So they don't respond. Yep. So not only are we as Black women like holding like the stress and the tension of living in this country that is like ongoing and chronic, and then when that stress begins to take a toll on our bodies, and then we go to places that are supposed to support us and help us, they don't even believe us. They don't listen to us. Mm. And so that kind of like subtle, like dying, like, you know, yeah, the health conditions that, you know, my godmother and like, you know, the turtle we lost, that they died, but they're physical. But I'm clear that the root of those physical conditions is systemic and it's institutional.
Right.
And so I'm glad that the evidence is beginning to be built to support that. And exactly, Kim Porter dying for 47. And I've been reading that story, like what's going on? Like, and so just really talking about what's at the root of these physical conditions, what's the impact of this world that we're living in, and what happens when the systems that we try to go to get support to deal with it don't even believe us. They don't care. And so looking at that, I was like, understanding that subtleness of the ways that we're being killed because of the world that we live in, I started to look at, wait, what are the ways that I participate in that?
Right.
I can recognize that I live in a world that puts me last, that puts Black people last, puts Black women last, puts queer people last. Like, I can see that that's the world that we live in. Right. But then what are the ways that I participate in putting myself last? And that's where this idea of like me first was like really born, of like, oh, it's a matter of survival in this world for us to put ourselves first.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. For someone, you know, you know, I think for you specifically, being who you are, to say, I'm going to put myself first is a revolutionary statement.
Yeah.
It's a revolutionary act because you are constantly put last, you know, and that's you know, when you said it to me, it just kind of like shook, you know, the earth kind of shook a little bit. And I was like, exactly, you know, exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems so simple, but it's the most profound thing, you know, and it really is the most radical thing, you know, because who else is gonna, you know, put you first like this? Right? You're not putting yourself first. And even if we're, you know, systemically trying to do that, you know, there's something individual about that as well, right? So anyway, I want to come back to, you know, the next question here, which is, where our people get tripped up, you know? So it's often around, I think, what we started calling the difference between me first and me only. Right? So there's a difference. The reason we call this me first and not me only, right? You know, because I think, you know, the state of, you know, white supremacy is me only.
Yes.
So there's a difference between me first and me only. So what's the difference for you, and how is that related to, you know, the work that we're doing?
Oh, I think that's like been, in terms of my own personal block and the blocks I've seen for people in our communities, is that idea of not wanting to be selfish, you know, and this idea of like, well, I need to take care of everyone around me because I care about them, I love them, and that's what I'm supposed to do. And the idea of being selfish is actually what prevents us from practicing me first and putting ourselves first. And I recognize that label of like, the label of like selfishness, the label of like being a bitch, the label of being too needy or too emotional, those are all intentional tools used to suppress us, you know, and to keep us in check. And so realizing like, oh wait, actually it isn't really selfish, because I was sitting with and living with the impact of me not putting myself first. Right. And realizing, wait, I'm not putting myself first. I'm running around trying to please everyone, trying to make everyone happy, trying to bend over backward to like make all the students in this program happy and get what they need, trying to, give my son what he needs, and let me make everyone else around me happy. If my relationship is working, it's all my fault, I need to fix it. Like running around like that. And realizing like, wait, I'm doing all this running around and things still aren't working. Like, you know, my relationships still aren't, like, I'm still having conflicts. We're not moving through stuff. Like, I'm still like feeling this distance with my son. Like, students are always going to be complaining, and realizing like, oh, I'm trying to run around, take care of everyone. And what I'm doing isn't even working. I'm not even having the impact that I want to have in my work. I'm not actually having the relationships I want to have in my work. I'm actually not even feeling healthy. Like, I'm drained and I'm tired all the time. I was like, that actually isn't working. And so realizing that, you know, this idea of me only is built on the lie that we're not interconnected. And what we've known in our communities for years is that we are interconnected. And therefore, if we're interconnected, like my well-being contributes to the well-being of the whole. My joy contributes to the joy of the whole. Every act of freedom I take forward is a contribution to our collective freedom. And so reorienting and re-anchoring myself in what I know is true about who we are as human beings and how we're connected is what like shattered that myth of selfishness and, you know, me only, like me first is all about me. And it doesn't mean, you know, I don't think about anyone else, but actually realizing it's the opposite. If I really care about everyone else, if I really want to have an impact, if I really want to like transform all this injustice in the world and heal that, I need to put myself first. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also this idea too of, you know, like capitalism, especially patriarchy, white supremacy, really live on this idea of us as marginalized people not being valuable, right? And we internalize that, we can't help it because we're in this world and it's constantly shaping us in ways that we're not even aware of.
Right.
And so when we walk through and we don't really know the value that we bring to the whole, it's easy to not put yourself first. But when you realize like, wait, I'm a gift. I have something to add to this mix that if I don't do it, it's not going to be there. And then if I don't do it and it's not there, we're not going to move forward.
Right.
Like just realizing that is what has allowed me to like work through. And I mean, it still comes up because when you do practice putting yourself first, other people are going to be disappointed.
Right.
They may be angry. They may have tantrums. They may walk away from you. You know, you may not no longer belong in the communities you belong in because you're like, you know, kind of like shaking things up. And so there is like a huge risk. And so kind of remembering and coming back to one, the failure of not putting myself first and how that actually takes me further away from what I want and what we say we want is what kind of helps me move through the discomfort of actually practicing me first and risking being called selfish, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, something interesting that you touched on is, you know, when you're not practicing me first, you're also drawing relationships to you that, you know, will feed, you know, you're probably drawing me onlys, you know, to you, you know.
Yes.
You know, and that's there's an interesting, you know, when you commit to me first, watching who stays and who goes. And I call it the needy and the greedy. You know, and so it's on the spectrum. You've got the, you know, the greedy, like, and the needy. The needy are also like a me only group for me.
Yeah.
You know, so give me. I don't have. There's that, you know, where there's not like initiative and all of that stuff. You know, so, you know, how do we break out of that dichotomy and practice me first and, you know, the empowerment of the collective through the self? You know, and I think we always set up the dichotomy of the self versus the collective. You know, that's a false dichotomy, like you just stated. There is no difference between the self and the collective in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? The collective is made up of the multiple selves. And if the multiple selves aren't whole, then the collective isn't whole.
Exactly.
You know? And so me first just means if I put myself first, then I'm able to be my full whole self in the collective.
Exactly.
Movements.
Yes.
I think we, you know, we'll talk more about this later when we talk about my me first stuff, you know. But, you know, we're always trying to manage our resources and manage ourselves instead of be ourselves. Something around that is related to me first as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought in the piece of wholeness too, because I think me first is about wholeness. You know, it is about like honoring and tending to those parts of ourselves that we neglect, those parts of ourselves that we ignore, those parts of ourselves that the world tells us shouldn't exist or should quiet down.
Right.
You know? And so it is about stepping into our own wholeness so that we can bring our whole selves to our relationships, to our communities, to our work, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. From the filled cup, you know, the overfilled, I think it was Lisa Nichols to talk about the saucer, you know, when the water's in your saucer, that you give water from your saucer, not from your cup. Right. I thought that really struck me.
Yeah.
No matter what you know, what you, how you flip that, it makes sense, you know? So how do we how do we practice that? And so, and I wanted to ask you, I guess, the following question, which really builds on the wholeness piece, is, what's the relationship between, you talked a little bit about this in your piece, about this idea of the fear of dying without fulfilling your divine assignment.
Yeah.
Why that stuck with me so deeply, because I think that's really what we're afraid of, and the erasure, the death is the death of that possibility.
Yes.
Power of the potential of what you came here to do. That's what we're really doing when we contribute to the death of, particularly people, that are at the bottom of the totem pole, here or whatever, I don't like to use that term. Actually, it's probably not a good term, but the bottom of, the structure, the system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when you're, when you're, being erased, we're losing, the gift and the talent and the beauty of what you came here to do. And I don't want to think about it in a consumerist sense. I'm talking about it in a human sense.
Yeah.
No, we're not talking about it in a market sense, but in a human sense, the value, just you being here is a gift.
Yeah.
Right. So we're crushing that.
Yeah.
And we're destroying that. Yeah. And then that makes our world a worse place to be in.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to just recognize how that's intentional. Like, systemic oppression is intentional. Like, we're like, it's designed to disrupt our communities, to have our communities not be made up of like whole people, and people who are aligned with like their sense of their value, their sense of their worth, their sense of like, hey, I have something important to say. I have something of value to contribute. Like, that's, it's intentional that we don't live in that message, that's not what we're taught in school, that's not what's reinforced in the shows that we watch and the ads that we witness, because, that would mean like communities of people who are living in their power, like me first is the root to us reclaiming our power. And so, yeah, so just like recognizing that it's an act of both like, like, it's both like spiritual and like political, like liberation to like step into like me first and step into like our power and our value and our worth. And to do that without the validation of the world around us is the ultimate act of like revolution and stepping forward. So, yeah,
that's profound. So leading me into my next question, which is, what's the relationship between me first, what we call radical purpose, and your divine assignment, and love and freedom, all those things together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like our purpose, like freedom and love, like all that stuff, like can't really take hold or take flight until we're practicing me first, and me first for me is like, there are 3 different layers of like what me first means to me. The first layer is about prioritizing my time and my energy towards the things that matter the most to me, towards the things that I feel called to do. And the second layer of meaning for me first is around like realizing that we have like healing work to do, that we have been like indoctrinated and conditioned with all these like beliefs of our inferiority and the ways we need to prove ourselves and defend our worth in this world, and that has an impact, and that's something we need to like heal,
right,
and prioritize doing that.
Right.
And then the third piece is, once we do that, then we are able to create this new world that we say we want, because we're not coming from that conditioned, way that's actually rooted in like oppressive beliefs of like, okay, I'm not worth it, so let me push to prove myself. Or I don't have anything to say, so let me just shrink down what I want and like go along with what's happening. And so being able to like, the third layer of meaning for me first is being able to like be a leader, and regardless of what the world around you is saying, be able to stand in your vision and act from that place. Instead of pointing the finger and being like, the system needs to do that and this person needs to do this, then it's like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to bring forward? How are you going to be, And so doing that isn't possible in a sustainable way until we decide and are really clear about making choices, conscious choices about what we say yes to in terms of giving our time and our energy to, that we like, instead of running around trying to please other people, meet other people's agendas, we say, hold up, I need to like get right with me first. I need to focus on my own healing. I have some trauma from like living in this world that I want to tend to, and I want to prioritize doing that. And then that's what allows us to go out in the world and be leaders and step forward and act from our vision instead of this like reactive place.
Right.
And so, you know, when I think about our purpose or like our divine assignment, like the thing that we came to contribute to this whole that's uniquely ours, I feel like that's something that we're always connected to. It's kind of always talking to us or like whispering to us. Like we have these whispers of what we feel called to do or what we dream about or what we daydream about. And when you're not practicing me first, it's almost like that whisper gets lower and lower, you know? And when you're practicing me first and kind of coming back into yourself, it's like you're strengthening your relationship with that inner knowing of what you came here to do and what's important to you, what you desire, what you want, you know, and you're saying that that's important. You're giving that value. And then doing that is what allows that purpose to kind of take shape because you create space for it in your life. And so in doing that, whenever you make that choice to be in alignment with your purpose, to be in alignment with what you need, to be in alignment with what you want, that's an act of freedom, you know? And I think sometimes we talk about freedom as like this place to get to. And to me, it's a practice, you know, and it's a daily practice. And it's about those tiny little choices that we make every day about, do I say this or do I say that? Am I going to wake up now and am I going to wake up then? You know, am I going to like take a walk or am I going to like, you know, sit at my computer and just keep working? You know, like all those choices that we're making are the practice of freedom. You know, when we make them in service of who we really are and what we really, you know, what we're here to do and what we're really committed to.
Right.
And then that idea of like love, you know, to me is about, it's about like acceptance and wholeness, you know? And so realizing that our purpose, walking our purpose is about making these daily choices about coming from freedom, coming from love, doing the things that are going to set ourselves free. And then in turn that, you know, ripples out in terms of how we're able to show up in our relationships, in our movements, in our work, in our, you know, even with ourselves, you know, how we're treating ourselves. And so as we do that for ourselves individually, then we're able to like spread that freedom message and love out into our relationships and our communities.
Right. I love that, you know, we talk about this freedom as a practice and love as a practice. You know, that coming back to that, I always come back to that. And purpose as a practice.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, that we deal with Turtle Tank, we talk about the idea of purpose, and people assume it's something that you find and that's it, you know, that's like, I found my purpose. It's like, no, it's constantly, it's this evolving, ever emerging, you know, knowing. It's almost like you're coming into focus more and more with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and so that me first, you know, that self that you need to get to know in that way is what starts to bring that purpose into focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
That practice, you know, that me first practice is what brings that purpose into place.
Yeah. And I think like we don't necessarily think of like our natural ways of being. Like we don't think about the ways that like not prioritizing ourselves is actually us enacting our own oppression. You know, like we don't realize like, oh, these are like the abusive messages that I've gotten that I'm actually doing to myself, you know? And so me first is really about like starting with at the core, right? We talk about this in Turtle Tank, starting with your relationship with yourself and then moving out to your relationship with others and your community and, you know, the world at large.
Right.
And I think that, that it is that piece that you're talking about in terms of, are you going to treat yourself with abuse, you know? Or are you going to like treat yourself with love and honor who you are?
Right. Yeah. Even, you know, it reminds me of like when I started to work for myself.
Yeah.
Right? How I reapplied all the ways in which I was abused.
Yeah.
In design my job for myself
Yeah.
in that way.
Exactly. I mean, I realized for me, like I had this thing, like I need to earn the right to rest, like, oh, well, I can't rest because I didn't get to like, item number 154 on my to-do list, and just all these ways where it's like, oh, I don't deserve a rest. I don't deserve to like, take a break or go for a walk right now because I didn't do what I was supposed to do, like it's like, where did that come from that I need to earn my right to rest,
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is, one of those messages that we internalize that we don't even question that we're enacting on ourselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about, marginalized folks as, and the idea of value, you touched on this, is the need to prove our worth and our value. Right. And how, in a way, me first kind of moves us out of this dynamic, is we're constantly trying to prove ourselves,
Yeah.
things to prove ourselves. Like, no, we're good people. We're good. We can do this. We work really hard. We're even with us, even with us in Turtle Tank, like, oh no, we're here for everybody and we're going to take care of everything. We're going to facilitate every problem that comes up and every challenge, every this, and being stretched, we learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Being stretched, dealing with things that aren't even ours to deal with. Even with people of color, even with, all of that stuff, know? And so I was thinking about, the difference between, and that transition that we have to make between feeling like we need to prove ourselves and how huge of a disservice that does for our work, because it makes us do all sorts of things that aren't in our purpose really and aren't in our lane. And then just the idea of being able to be.
Yeah.
To be completely entirely yourself, which seems like a privilege in this world. I'm able to just be myself. I'm just going to come up with an idea. I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like, we can't afford to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Our mistakes are life and death sometimes, or can we afford to make mistakes? And who's being hard on us when we are making mistakes? And what spaces can we make mistakes in? And there's a negotiation there's strategy, there's work, but, how do we walk more deeply into this, out of the proving and into the just being, and how has that gonna lift us out into new worlds of like radical love and freedom?
Yeah.
That's really the question. I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question. I think that sense of like believing and knowing that our presence is enough. Just our presence is enough was really huge for me, because that was I'm still shedding it, but I didn't realize how much I felt like I needed to caregive. I needed to take care of other people. Like that's what made me worthy. And like letting go of that was like really scary, because I felt like, oh my goodness, then no one's gonna be around me and I'm just gonna be invisible and no one's gonna like want to talk to me or be my friend or hire me or like I need to. What do you mean my presence is enough? Yeah. And to me, that's something that really only got healed in community. Of being in communities where I felt safe enough to just be myself, and then have that affirmed. And have people be like, oh, wow, what you just said, like, just created this opening for me. Or watching you do that silly little dance that you're doing over there, you're not even thinking about, brought this for me, gave me permission to go do what I want to do, And I think that having those reflections in community is what started, because I would always be struck and be like, what? Like, this thing, like, I'm just talking, like I'm just hanging out, like I'm just doing me. Right. And just noticing like, oh wait, like that's it, like that's all I have to do. And actually it has the opposite effect. It doesn't, like, people don't run away. I mean, some people do, probably it's like those needy folks you're talking about, but actually it draws people to me, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's medicine for other people, and it's inspiring other people. And so that's what began to like heal that wound for me of like, oh no, I need to prove myself, otherwise I'm not worthy. Right. And it's also really subtle, because one of the things I noticed that I was really surprised about that started to shift when I was practicing me first was just all the little things that I was doing that I wasn't that I wasn't even like asking for help around. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, I was just kind of like, oh, I'll just do this and this and this and this. And it wasn't until I started practicing Me First where I was like, oh, I'm tired. I can actually ask for help, you know? I can actually be like, you know, son, whenever you drink and you're the last person that like fill the water bottle, fill it back up. Like just beginning to just be really clear about like the kind of help and support I want from people. But also like on a deeper level, even in terms of like our work together, right? Like it's what helped us get clear about like, hey, we've been designing this work almost prioritizing other people's needs ahead of our own. And so of course we're getting burnt out and we're getting stressed out and we're getting tired. What would it look like to design a program that actually is aligned around like our needs and our desires?
Right.
Which is where like what brought like gave birth to this campaign and like the new program we're launching. And it's like these subtle ways where we think we're being in service,
right?
But really we're not, you know? And we think that, oh, I'm just being helpful. I'm going to clean up the whole house and fold all the laundry and do all this stuff. Like I'm being helpful. Well, actually you're not, you know, like, because you're not also allowing your household or your community to contribute to you, you know? And so yeah, so it's been a process, and it's just been really interesting around how, the more I practice Me First, the more I'm reaching out for support, the more I'm re-engaging and reconnecting and rekindling old like relationships. Like it's actually bringing me more connection and more community. It's actually like having me feel more supported. And because I feel more supported, I feel more confident and more creative and more bold. And, you know, and it started with this fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to be selfish if I actually ask for what I want or actually say what's coming up for me or what's true for me.
Right.
And I think that, you know, it's really about like, you know, this deep kind of like self-trust, right. And like this idea of like reclaiming like our power and knowing that we can ask for what we want and take care of ourselves regardless of like how the world responds or whether there's a, you know, the answer is no, you know, to what we're asking for. Right. And so when you know that at the end of the day, you've got your back, that you're going to take your own, you know, the doctor may not believe you, your kids may not care, but you're going to take your own pain seriously. You're going to listen to that and tend to it. You're going to take your own desires seriously. You're going to like take this idea that maybe other people are being like, oh, that doesn't make sense. You're going to take it seriously and actually act on it. Like that level of like self-trust of knowing like, okay, I've got my back in that way is really powerful. Right. And I'm really appreciating the way that it's allowing me to actually build more intimate relationships and connections with the people around me. Right. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love you ending on this self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
because I think part of it is, right, it's like we have these parts of ourselves that are sending us messages. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we misread those messages, you know, and we think like, oh, I'm being too needy, or oh, shut up, you know, I don't have time for that, or oh, you're just afraid, you know, I'm going to feel you, but do it anyways. Like we just kind of like have all these ways of like repressing and shutting ourselves down. Right. When we actually begin to like tend to those parts of ourselves and like tend to our fears and take it seriously. And then because we're taking our fears seriously, like create the protection and support that we need. Right. Then like those parts of ourselves are going to be like, oh, you're listening to me. Oh, okay. I can trust you because you hear me, you know? Right. Oh, okay. You're seeing the signs that I'm telling you that, you know, you're pushing too hard and we're getting tired and worn out. Oh, okay. I can trust you now, you know? So that's where that relationship with self and that self-trust comes from. Right. Is by like that practicing of Me First and us believing ourselves and listening to ourselves and not being like the doctors in the hospitals that are like, those are your symptoms. I don't believe you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like it takes so much more for the more marginalized we are, the more we have to put ourselves first and believe in ourselves and believe ourselves.
Yes.
You know, and there's, so part of what, you know, part of our work at Turtle Tank is that,
yeah,
you know, is we really talk about strategic being, like building our sense of self-worth and our sense of value and our sense of self-trust and our sense of, so that we can keep moving through all the crap, you know, that we have to move through to make this happen.
Yeah.
And it's not ideal. It's not what, you know, we prefer, you know, but in order to build out the ecosystems that we need to not have to do as much of that anymore, which, you know, is arguable, you know, arguably, you know, better or worse, I don't know, you know. We have to, yeah, we have to walk into that, you know. So, and I was thinking one last thing, and we can close on this. You know, EJ's, you know, we talk about this in Turtle Tank too, the difference between like duty and desire, you know, and that relationship to me first. Right. And the relationship to, I think we often associate desire, even subconsciously. We talk about it, we say, oh yeah, desire is great, we need to meet our desire, blah, 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 blah. You know, but we're afraid of our desire.
Yeah.
You know, we're afraid of what we really, really want. You know, instead of doing what we really want, we lie, we cheat, we lie to ourselves, you know. You know, we pretend that we're being of service to others, when in reality, like, we're just operating on our old trauma, you know, all of that stuff. So I have this duty, I have to do this thing because it's my sense, there's a sense of identity connected to that.
Yeah.
You know, and when we break out of that and we start trusting desire as something that is working towards our freedom and our, you know, and our self-love and our liberation, you know, then we start to walk into new worlds, new possibilities, you know. And so I'm curious about, you know, if you can talk a little bit about duty and desire, and then we can, you know, start closing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think like this idea of duty was really eye-opening for me, you know, because like you said, like I come from like the gender violence, like nonprofit world, and you know, have been in social justice spaces, like leftist social justice spaces for years. And I think like there's this way that duty can kind of creep in and have people get really rigid about what liberation looks like, what justice looks like, and how we need to get there.
Right.
And I saw and was in contact with a lot of people who were doing their movement work from a place of duty, of this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how it's supposed to go down, and this is what is going to make the revolution that, you know, happen. But meanwhile, you know, I saw the impact that was having on them, on our relationships with each other, like on just like our overall like health and well-being, like all of that. And I was just like, there's something off here, you know, like even though it's radical work we're doing and we have these politics, there's still a way that it doesn't feel, it doesn't feel like it's completely aligned or authentic and actually in service of the communities that we say we want to serve, you know. And it really, you know, I mean, I grew up in Nigeria, so I grew up around a lot of like being around a lot of dutiful people who were coming to help, you know, help my people with like malaria and help my people with fixing their roads and ending corruption and doing all this stuff. And I've been on the other end of receiving someone's duty-filled work, and it doesn't feel good.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And this idea of desire, I think, is one that, you know, kind of connects to that piece of like selfishness.
Right.
It feels very privileged to be like, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to honor what I want, you know? And I tell this to the turtles all the time. My relationship to desire shifted when I heard the proverb that our desires are our ancestors' prayers. And I think, especially for us marginalized folks, that's really important to remember. Like, where do our desires actually come from? You know, we're talking, and I'm glad that people are talking more about intergenerational trauma, because I think that's important. And we don't talk enough about intergenerational resilience. And I think desire is one of the ways that resilience speaks to us. And so there's that shift and that understanding that like, oh, my desire isn't this like selfish thing about me just getting what I want. It's actually a calling, a remembering, a re-anchoring that's guiding me forward and about me, you know, doing what I need to do to contribute to our, you know, our collective freedom. Because I'm really clear that I wouldn't be here. Like, I wouldn't be like here in this country on using this technology, like with you. Like, I'm really clear you know, that I'm here because of the work of people who came before me, who listened to their desires,
Right.
right? And so I'm like, oh, okay. Like my desire is also about how I'm going to contribute to this legacy of us, you know, helping and supporting the freedom of all of us, you know, all our liberation. And so, so that was like a helpful, really helpful shift for me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Our desire is not here to hurt us.
No.
Right?
No.
That's what what people would like for us to believe.
Yeah, it's a guiding principle.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Sometimes generations old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if in the erasure of desire is what makes us inhuman.
Yes. Yeah. And that again was something that was very intentional in like the institutional, you know, the institutionalization of like oppression, you know, is about like erasing the desires of the people that you want to oppress.
Right. Precisely. Right.
Yeah.
And so that brings me to closing, and I feel like we really came really nicely in full circle here, because your piece, your letter that you wrote, this was so powerful and so poignant, and it cycled from, you know, the first sentence being, I want to die often. Mm-hmm. It struck me. I cried reading that piece, and then the last sentence being, I don't want to die. I don't really want to die. I just want to be free. Mm-hmm. You know, and so in a way, you just said, you know, the erasure, you know, of desire and the ability to express desire and to express ourselves first, ourselves, is the death of us. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And I love how you know, thread that together. And I love that you came out with, I don't really want to die. I just want to be free. And sometimes that's the only option. And we know this historically. Yeah. Right? That is an exit out, peace, yeah. Freedom, you know? Yeah. So what is our responsibility in creating the kind of world where someone that wants to live in desire can stay here? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And because we've all struggled, I struggled with this too, and we're going to talk about my Me First story. You know, and I'm very, just the courage that you have to put that out. You know, what is the world that we have to create, right? And that's the big question that I'm taking from your piece and from this. You know, to keep people that are as beautiful, as powerful, as, you know, creative as yourself here, you know, because we need you. Yeah. You know, and we need you to fulfill your divine assignment. We need you to live from a place of desire. Yeah. And I'll say this very personally for me, you know, you and I've had these personal conversations. Maybe this is too personal for this call, you know, but they're, you know, some of our conversations go like this. I don't want you to die. Yeah. Right? Like, I'm scared you're going to die. Yeah. That's you know, when you start having those kinds of conversations in like a fight, like, I'm watching you and I don't want you to die. Yeah. You know, and especially after we lost our turtle, and it just kind of hit me like, you know, that there was this urgency around losing, you know, all the people that I love. Yeah. You know, and how I've lost the people that I love to that very fact. Yeah. Right. And then to the impact of erasure. However we want to call it, stress, trauma, oppression, blah, 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 blah. It really is the erasure of the expression of the self in its fullness. Mm-hmm. What you know, what that, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, I want to participate in creating a world where, you know, we can both be here. Yeah. Yeah. In our fullest selves. Yeah. You know, and that's, you know, it sounds so simple. I feel like the older I get, the more simple the stuff I want to say is, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, but yeah, it's real. Thank you, Callie. Or Kaylee, I think is how you say your name, right? I keep remembering. But yeah, it's such a, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's how it feels. So, EJ, I'm glad you're still here.
Mm,
And
I'm glad you're still here too.
I know we both almost exited a few times.
Yeah.
So, um, and I don't know what my world would be without you,
Yeah.
also. So,
I'm also just like really just like sitting with how like both of us like struggling with that, like struggling with like honoring our desire, um, honoring what we have, like feeling that pull of like, I don't want to be here anymore, like, you know, and wanting to create a space where other people who feel that way can come. Like I feel like that's that's also like that pain is also what had us like give birth to Turtle Tank.
right.
Where we're not like, oh, we have this agenda of what it means to be radical and you need to do this, and use these terms and act in this way. But it's really about like moving away from duty and stepping into purpose and stepping into desire and then beginning to just experiment. And we're figuring it out as we go along, because in actuality, like people may have written books and, you know, be able to like write all this fancy prose about this amazing new world we're building and how it's gonna, you know, come about. But the practice of it is a whole nother thing, you know, and I feel like that's what we're really sitting in, is the messiness of the practice of that, but also the beauty of like, oh, reconnecting with like me just being me and me trusting in my value and, you know, finding, having the anchor of my purpose and my desire to like guide me to this like huge task of like creating a world that's like based on love and freedom. Like that's a huge task, and it's what it's going to take from us is having safe spaces where we can begin to like unravel what's duty and what's desire and then what's our real work in that, and to be able to explore it and make mistakes and be in the process of it, you know, and then also notice that stuff is going to come up, like our own personal self-abuse stuff is going to come up, but also the ways that we abuse other people and hurt other people that we say we love, you know, and then also the ways that some of our work that we think is like so helpful and all about contribution are actually really disrespectful to the communities that we're doing that when we come from this place of duty, or I have the answer I'm going to share with you. And so, yeah, so I think I'm just struck with how like our pain and the ways that we struggled is what brought us to this place of like creating a practice home where we can, you know,
Yeah.
and to, yeah, to sit in our desire and our purpose and see what worlds come out of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So here we are at the end of this.
Yes.
And I want to honor you. You said we were going to do 30 minutes and we ended up in an hour and then about a little less, but about, but I think it's every single thing you said was worthy of being on here. And I'm so glad that I asked you additional questions. I know we planned on shorter than that, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being vulnerable and courageous all at the same time, and really powerful, you know, and having the voice that you have, the story that you have, and telling your story in the way that you did. Um, yeah, I'm just so I'm proud, you know, so incredibly grateful, and just, you know, love you deeply, you know. Um, and yeah, I just want to close with that. And I want everybody to continue to join us on the future stories that we're going to be sharing. The next one is mine, you know, so we'll talk about me a little bit. And EJ will be interviewing me. But again, EJ, this is EJ's brain baby, or soul baby. Let me say that. It came from like the deep, you know, the depth of her soul. And again, I'm so grateful for that, for the gift of you and the gift of what you brought to this, and the re-energizing, you know, the breath, the re-energizing breath that you brought to Turtle Tank. And Turtle Tank is really, you know, we joke about love and freedom, you know, and you're the freedom in that, in that work.
Well, I mean, yeah, you are the love, you know. Because I just think like I was in the shower and I was just like thinking about, you know, I was just having these thoughts, and then I was just like, guess what I was thinking about in the shower, and I started telling you, and then you were like, what? You know, and I feel like your love really is what like fed this idea and like these stories that we're telling, you know. And so yeah, so I just want to thank you for listening to me and believing in me and like, you know, supporting me and allowing me to like to share the story and bring the message forward. So thank you.
You're so welcome. You've done that and more for me. So everyone, this is Ije, co-founder of Turtle Tank, chief transformation officer at Turtle Tank, the incredible, beautiful, wonderful human being that is changing the world with her practice of freedom and embodying freedom. Living in desire, living in purpose. I'm so grateful for you, EJ, again. We're going to close out, and we'll see you all. You can check us out at turtletank.co, turtletank.co/me first is our campaign. And you can go to the website. You'll land on the campaign somehow. Sign up to our newsletter if you haven't. We're going to be sharing a workshop that we call a deep dive that's related to Me First and our radical purpose that we think is like the very first, you know, exercise that we like to teach folks around this work. So stay tuned. We're coming out with some stuff, and we'll see you on the other side with our next, our upcoming interview. And then we've got a few interviews coming, so you can check out the schedule on that page, that Me First page. All right, everybody, have a good day. Thanks, EJ.
Thank you, Salia.
Bye.
Bye.